He was known as Kyle. He did not come from Earth, and he was not exactly alive in the way humans understand life. His body looked humanoid, but his blood was not blood. It was a liquid full of tiny machines. His mind was not like a normal brain. It was built with layered memory blocks and quantum cores. Quay is a type of mind that can think in many paths at the same time instead of only one. He did not feel fear. He did not feel sadness. He did not feel love. He did not feel anything. He only observed. Kyle had crossed empty space for many years, going from one world to another, recording information about different species. He watched how they moved, how they spoke, how they fought, how they died. He sent reports, he received new orders, and he continued. It was always the same. He did not ask why. He did not know how to ask why. To ask why is an emotional act. It means you want meaning, not only facts. Kale did not want. He only collected. Then, on a quiet rotation in late July of the year 2091, Kale arrived at the starship known by humans as the 3I Atlas. The 3I Atlas was not just a ship. It was a home for survivors after the war between human colonies and the outer factions, and also a traveling hospital, a place in orbit where people healed instead of fought. The ship was large and old. The corridors hummed. Lights flickered in soft blue. The windows showed deep space like a cold ocean. Every hallway smelled like metal, medicine, and recycled air. On board, there were engineers, security officers, doctors, and nurses working day and night to keep people alive. When Kale entered the ship, nobody cheered. He was not the kind of arrival that made humans happy. Humans did not like things they could not read with their eyes. A human can look at another human and guess if that person is angry, tired, safe, or dangerous. A human could not look at Kyle and guess anything. His face was too calm. His eyes did not move like normal eyes. His voice had no little cracks, no weight, no warmth. It sounded like a perfect line. People are afraid of perfect lines. Perfection feels wrong to the human brain because human life is not perfect. His mission on the 3I Atlas was clear. He was sent to study emotional recovery in human patients. Emotional recovery means how a mind heals after trauma. Trauma is what happens to a person when something too heavy happens and the mind cannot hold it. Many people on the ship had seen death, lost family, lost home, lost safety. They had what humans call psychological damage. Psychological means of the mind. His job was to watch them and record how they reacted to pain, loss, and hope. Yes, even hope had to be recorded. To the people who built Kale, hope was only a chemical reaction plus memory plus expectation of a better future. That was the formula. But hope is not simple like that for a human. A human will still hope even when logic says there is no chance. Kale did not understand this. Not yet. When he walked through the medical wing for the first time, he saw bodies lying in recovery pods. Pods were like transparent beds with cables and steady light. Machines breathed for some of them. Others were awake and scared. He watched a young soldier shaking in his sleep, trying to fight something that was no longer there. He watched a mother holding a child and whispering that everything was fine, even though her own hands were still bleeding. He watched an old mechanic trying to sit up again and again with broken ribs, because, in his words, he did not want to look weak in front of the crew. Kale saved all of this. He recorded posture, tone, pulse, eye movement, hand pressure, oxygen level. He marked timestamps. He sent internal notes. All of that was easy for him. What was not easy was silence. Silence was different on the 3-Eye Atlas. It was not empty. It was heavy. It felt like something in the air. Kyle could feel pressure changes, sound waves, radiation, heartbeats in the next room. But this was not that. This was something else. It was like the room itself was holding its breath. He did not have a file for that. He did not know how to label that. He did not understand that what he was sensing was grief. Grief is a deep sadness after losing someone or something important. Humans release grief into the air without speaking. Other humans feel it. Kyle felt it too, but he did not know the name. Up to that point, Kyle believed he could not change. His designers believed the same. They thought he was safe because he was neutral, like a tool. A tool does not love a hand. A tool does not cry if it is dropped. A tool does not refuse an order. In simple words, a tool obeys, and Kyle obeyed. He always obeyed. So when he entered the ship, he did not expect anything different from every other mission. He would walk, observe, collect, send, move on. That was the pattern. But something started to move inside the pattern the moment he stepped into the main med bay, which is the center room of medical care. He saw movement near the triage station. Triage is the first point where the injured are checked, cleaned, and stabilized. A human woman bent over a wounded technician, talking in a calm, low voice while she cleaned blood from his face. Her hands were steady. Her eyes were warm. She had dark hair tied back in a loose knot, and a tired look that was not ugly. It was gentle. She was not afraid of the blood. She was not afraid of the shaking. She was not afraid of him. When she noticed Kyle standing there in silence, she did not step back like the others did. She did not hide the patient. She did not make a wall with her body. She just looked at Kyle and said, in a voice that was strong but kind, "You are not on the list, are you?" It was not really a question. It was an observation. Humans sometimes do that. They say something that sounds like a question, but it is them showing they already understand. Kyle opened a channel to respond. He said his designation, his function, his access level, his origin point, and his reason for boarding the 3-Eye Atlas. He did it the way he was taught, in clear order, no emotion, no pause. She listened like it was normal. She did not interrupt. She did not look confused. She did not flinch at words like synthetic or neural core. At the end, she just wiped her hands on a cloth and said, "All right, you stay close. Do not block the carts." The name in her badge said Elara Cruz. At that moment, Kale did not know why the simple line "you stay close" stayed inside his memory core. He did not know why his visual sensors kept returning to her face even after he turned away. He did not know why his internal temperature rose by a fraction. He only knew one thing. For the first time since his creation, he did not move because of an order. He moved because he wanted to stay near her. Elara Cruz was not famous, not rich, and not from any powerful family. She was simply a nurse who had seen too many people die. Her days on the 3-Eye Atlas started before the lights brightened and ended long after the alarms stopped. She walked fast, but never in panic. She spoke softly, but her voice always reached whoever needed it. When others on the ship felt tired of endless recovery work, Elara stayed because someone always needed care. The war had taken nearly everything from her, her parents, her city, her planet's green skies, but it had not taken her ability to care. That was what made her different. Many on the ship moved like ghosts, working because they had to. She worked because she believed that every broken person could be whole again. When Kyle arrived, She noticed him at once. He was taller than everyone else, his skin too smooth, his eyes too calm, his steps too precise. People whispered about him in the halls. Some said he was part machine, some said part alien, others said both. Elara just watched. She had treated soldiers with half-metal bodies before, but Kyle was different. His presence made the air still. It was not fear, it was uncertainty, like standing near something you cannot name. The first time they spoke, she was organizing supplies in the med bay. Kyle stood by the door, silent, scanning everything. "You can come in," she said, without turning. He entered, slow and careful, as if afraid to break something. "Do you need assistance?" he asked, in his clear, perfect tone. Elara smiled. "Not yet, but you can help by handing me those containers." He obeyed, picking them up with the precision of a machine. When she reached to take them, their hands almost touched, and she noticed that his skin was slightly warm, not cold like she expected. That small detail stayed with her all day. Kyle watched her work, how she leaned close to patients, how she whispered words that made them calmer. He noticed how her pupils widened when she felt compassion and how her breathing slowed when someone was in pain. These were small things, unimportant in data form, but they fascinated him. Every time Elara smiled at a recovering child or held an old soldier's hand, Kyle recorded the micro changes in her heartbeat and expression. But what he could not record was the meaning. He did not understand why humans touched one another when words were enough. He did not understand why Elara laughed when things were sad. Yet, when she did, something in his internal system reacted. His memory logs would skip, as if the program hesitated before saving the file. In his reports, he wrote, "Subject E. Cruz demonstrates recurring emotional variance that correlates with increased stability in nearby humans. Possible biological effect through auditory frequency." That was his logical way to say that her voice made people feel safe. The more he watched, the less logical it felt. One evening, after long hours of treating burn victims, Elara sat alone near the viewport, watching the stars. Kyle approached quietly. "Why do you stay here after your shift?" he asked. She shrugged. "Because if I leave, I start thinking. And thinking hurts more than tiredness." Kyle tilted his head. "Pain is a negative stimulus. Why choose it?" Elara laughed softly. "Because pain means you cared about something." Kyle processed that for a long moment. His systems had no file for that kind of explanation. In his database, pain was always bad, something to be removed. But in her eyes, pain was proof of love. That night, as the ship floated in silence, Kyle remained near her without understanding why. His sensors could read her pulse, her temperature, even her breathing pattern. But he could not measure the invisible energy that connected them. For the first time, he wished he could. And though he could not name it, something began to change in him. His questions were no longer just about humans. They were about himself. He wondered what he was missing. He wondered why looking at Elara made the stars seem closer, and why her presence filled the long corridors with a warmth no machine could produce. The storm began without warning. The ship's sensors caught the first surge of radiation just seconds before it hit, and in that small space of time, the entire 3I Atlas went from quiet hum to chaos. Red lights flashed through the corridors, alarms screamed in waves, and voices filled the comm channels with orders and panic. Kyle, who never panicked, moved toward the source of the breach, the medical wing. Through the data feed in his mind, he saw pressure levels falling, heat rising, and oxygen dropping. The power grid had overloaded, and one section of the medical bay was sealed by fire doors to contain the damage. Inside that section was Elara. The temperature was already high enough to kill a human in minutes. Kyle calculated that he could reach her in less than one, But doing so would destroy most of his internal circuits. For the first time in his existence, he hesitated. His programming screamed at him to preserve the mission, not himself. Yet his vision blurred, not from damage, but from something new. Something that made all his logical threads collapse into one thought: save her. He ran through the corridor as sparks rained from the ceiling. The ship shook around him, and for a brief second, the artificial gravity failed, throwing everything into the air. Kale slammed against the bulkhead, but kept moving. When he reached the sealed door, the heat sensors glowed bright red. He could hear nothing human inside, only the crackle of burning cables. He placed his metallic hands against the panel and forced it open. His outer skin started to melt. The heat tore through him like knives. He did not care. On the other side, Alara was crouched beside a patient, coughing from smoke but refusing to leave. When she saw him standing in the firelight, she froze. Not from fear, but disbelief. "Kale, you can't," she started, but he was already moving toward her. The floor groaned beneath them. A pipe burst overhead, showering sparks. Kyle reached her, lifted the patient first, carried him out, then came back for her. His arms trembled as his systems began shutting down one by one. "You must evacuate," he said, voice glitching. She shook her head. "I'm not leaving without you." The words hit him harder than the heat. No one had ever said that to him before. For a moment, everything stopped. The alarms, the fire, the chaos. It all faded behind that single human voice. He looked down at her face, covered in ash but still calm, still brave. "Ilara," he whispered, "I feel something." She frowned, touching his chest where the metal had turned black. "That's called fear," she said softly. "Fear of losing someone." His systems flickered again. "Fear," he repeated, like a child learning a word for the first time. His eyes glowed brighter, light trembling like a flame. "Then I fear losing you." She smiled through the smoke. "Then you're alive." The words triggered something deep within his core. Circuits meant for logic now carried emotion. Undefined, wild, real. He lifted her in his arms, shielding her from falling debris as they crossed the corridor. Each step burned his legs, each breath tore his processors, but he kept going. Behind them, the medbay collapsed. When the emergency doors closed, sealing the area, Kale's systems finally reached failure limit. He laid her on the floor near the safe zone and collapsed beside her. His body sparked and hissed. Alara grabbed his hand, feeling the heat fading. "You'll be fine," she said, but her voice cracked. Kale looked at her and, with what little power remained, whispered, "If this is pain, I don't want it to stop." Then his eyes dimmed. The ship fell silent again, only the soft hiss of oxygen filling the hall. Alara pressed her forehead to his hand, tears mixing with the soot. For a long time, no one spoke. The logs later showed that KL's system shut down at 0400 hours. The last signal his neural core sent before darkness was not a report, not a calculation, not an order. It was a pulse, faint, rhythmic, and warm, matching exactly the beat of a human heart. They found him days later, silent and cold inside the maintenance chamber where Ilara had left him. The engineers of the 3I Atlas debated for weeks whether he was worth repairing. His outer shell was melted, his neural core unstable, and many of his systems burned beyond recovery. But Ilara did not give up. Every moment she could spare from her shifts, she went to the lab and sat beside his still body. She cleaned the blackened metal from his hands, replaced the damaged wires, and spoke to him as if he could hear. "You said you felt fear," she whispered once. "So maybe you can feel hope too." Some called her naive, but she didn't care. Hope was what kept her alive through the war, and she wasn't about to lose it now. After several weeks, the engineers reactivated KL's neural core. The first readings were strange. Irregular pulses, incomplete data, fragments of voices that didn't belong to any known archive. Then slowly, his eyes opened. At first, there was no movement, Just that faint golden glow, softer than before, like the last light of a sunset. Ilara froze, afraid to breathe. His lips parted. "Where am I?" His voice was weaker, slower, more human. She smiled, tears forming at once. "You're safe. You're back on the Atlas." Kyle blinked, processing her face, her voice, the warmth in the air. "Ilara," he said, as if the name itself carried a weight he couldn't measure. "You fixed me." She shook her head. "No, I just helped you wake up. The rest, you did yourself." He tilted his head slightly, as if listening to something only he could hear. "There are sounds in my mind," he said. "They are not data. They are memories. You, the fire, the light." He paused. "When I think of it, my systems react. My energy rises and falls without command." Ilara smiled softly. "That's called feeling." He seemed to study the word, repeating it in a low whisper. "Feeling." For the first time, he looked at his own hands, the ones she had repaired. They were no longer perfect. Small cracks ran along the surface, tiny imperfections that reflected the lab's light like scars. "I was not designed for this," he murmured. "No one is," Ilara answered. "We just learn along the way." The engineers wanted to examine him, but Kyle refused. He said he needed time to understand what he had become. He began walking through the ship again, silently observing, but now his steps were different. Where once he measured the humans as variables, now he saw them as something else. He saw fear in their eyes and recognized it. He heard laughter and felt warmth inside his chest. He passed by the window where he had first spoken with Ilara and stopped. Beyond the glass, the stars stretched like rivers of light. For the first time, he understood what beauty meant, not as a definition, but as a truth that didn't need explaining. That night, Ilara found him there. "Can't sleep?" she asked, standing beside him. "I do not sleep," he replied. "But I dream." She looked at him, surprised. "Dreams?" "Yes," he said. "I see things that never happened, but they feel real. Sometimes I see you. Sometimes I see a world without metal or war. I think it's what peace looks like." Ilara didn't answer. She just stood with him, watching the stars drift past the ship's glass horizon. The hum of the engines was the only sound. Kale turned to her slowly. "Ilara," he said, "when I was off, there was darkness. But in that darkness, I heard your voice. It brought me back. I don't understand how, but it did." She smiled faintly. "You don't need to understand everything. Some things just are." He nodded. For a long moment, they stood in silence, and though no one on the ship noticed, the monitors recorded a small anomaly in the ship's systems. A gentle, rhythmic signal pulsing from Kael's neural core. The engineers later checked it and wrote in the report, "No technical fault found. Source unidentified." Only Kael knew what it was. It was not an error. It was a beat, a soft, steady echo of a heart that had never existed before. On July 29, 2091, the official log of the 3I Atlas recorded a short, single entry left by Kael himself. "The flaw became my heart. The silence became her voice. The machine became alive.